Author George R. Martin was so inspired by her life that he immortalised her as Olenna Tyrell. Let me introduce you to the matriarch of the Yorkist dynasty, Cecily Neville, Duchess of York. And if you're a lover of all things history, then don't forget to hit the follow. Cecily was born on the 3rd of May 1415, which does mean that she shares a birthday with her youngest daughter, Margaret of York. Cecily was the youngest child of Ralph Neville, 1st Earl of Westmoreland, and his second wife, Joan Beaufort. Through her mother, Cecily was a granddaughter of John of Gaunt, 1st Duke of Lancaster, and his third wife, Catherine Swynford. When she was just 8 years old, Cecily was betrothed to Richard Plantagenet, 3rd Duke of York. Richard received his title in 1415 following the death of his uncle at the Battle of Agincourt. Though they were betrothed as children, the couple did not marry until 1429, and their first child, Anne of York, was not born until August of 1439. The couple's eldest surviving son, Edward, was born on the 28th of April 1442 in Normandy. In later years, rumours would be spread by none other than Edward's younger brother, George. Their mother, Cecily, had had an affair with an archer named Blayborn, and that Edward was the result of this liaison, making him illegitimate. There is no substance to these rumours, and the relationship between Cecily and her husband appears to have actually been a very loving one. Together they had 12 children, and it does appear that Cecily went with her husband when he served as Lord Lieutenant of France. During the chaos of the 1450s that was defined by the Wars of the Roses, Cecily also sought to intervene with both Parliament and Margaret of Anjou on behalf of her husband and her brother Richard Neville, Earl of Salisbury. Cecily became a widow on the 30th of December 1460 when her husband was killed at the Battle of Wakefield alongside her second son, Edmund, Earl of Rutland. However, Cecily's fortunes changed once again in 1461 when her son became King Edward IV. In the early years of Edward IV's reign, Cecily would exert a lot of influence over her son. It was her use of the title, My Lady, the King's Mother, that later inspired Margaret Beaufort. Cecily also knew how to live, benefiting her status, despite the fact that she has a very pious reputation. Between 1443 and 1444, she spent £608 on clothes alone. Considering the fact that at the time England was undergoing a recession, the crown owed her husband a lot of money, that was an enormous sum. Throughout the remainder of her son's reign, Cecily acted as an advisor, governed her lands competently, and often acted as an intermediary between her children, particularly in 1469 and again in 1471 when her son George, Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, sought to overthrow Edward IV. Following the death of Edward IV in 1483, the English throne was briefly inherited by Cecily's grandson Edward V. Before the throne was then usurped by Cecily's youngest son, Richard III. We know little about Cecily's response to the usurpation of her grandson. However, given the fact that Richard was formally offered the English crown at Baynard's Castle in London, which was a property that belonged to Cecily Neville, I think it is safe to say she may have supported him because she is not believed to have had a good relationship with the Woodvilles. Richard was killed on the 22nd of August 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth. Cecily lived out the remainder of her life at Berkhamsted Castle, where she developed a reputation for piety, dying at the age of 80 in 1495.